still remember me?" the billionaire smirked, until the single dad's calm reply silenced the table. He didn't expect the room to go quiet the moment he stepped in. A dozen polished shoes, pressed suits, and calculating eyes shifted toward the man in the faded gray shirt, the man whose hands still carried the memory of wrench grease even after 3 washes. And at the far end of the long conference table, beneath the glare of white panel lights, the billionaire leaned back in his leather chair with a smirk, one of those smirks that said he already knew the ending of a story no one else had begun to tell. But the single dad simply took a breath, placed a thin folder on the table, and prayed his voice wouldn't shake. No one knew that 30 minutes earlier, he had stood in a supermarket aisle debating whether to buy bread or milk because buying both would break what little he had left. And now he was here, being judged, underestimated, and silently laughed at. Yet he didn't walk away. Not this time. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that remind us of humanity, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe before we continue. Your support truly keeps these stories alive. The meeting had been called for one reason: layoffs. Numbers had dipped, industries had shifted, and the billionaire chairman had flown in to restructure things. Everyone else sat stiffly, rehearsing polite answers, trying to protect their jobs. But the single dad had something different to protect: his little girl, Anna, who waited at school for a lunch he didn't know how to pay for tomorrow. He knew this job was the last thing holding their lives together. His wife had been gone for 2 years, taken by an illness that left medical bills stacked higher than their hopes. He had sold the car, the furniture, even the wedding ring she once begged him to never take off. But he never sold his pride. That was all he had left. The billionaire's smirk widened as he flipped through the dad's file. It wasn't even a thick file, no degrees, no awards, just years of service and a list of repairs he'd done for the company. Maintenance crew, the folder said, as if that defined the worth of a man who had raised a child alone, who had learned to cook, to braid hair, to sew tiny dresses because his daughter wanted to look pretty on picture day. The dad felt the weight of a dozen eyes pressing against him, judging him, wondering why a man like him was even allowed in the same room as executives. But he kept breathing, kept steady, because he had promised Anna last night that no matter what happened, Daddy would always find a way. The room smelled of expensive cologne and tension. Papers shuffled, pens clicked, and the billionaire began outlining cost cuts with the same cold efficiency one used to remove dust. Perhaps he thought the single dad would stay quiet. Perhaps he assumed this would be quick and easy. But sometimes life chooses the most unlikely person in the room to carry the strongest truth. When the billionaire made a dismissive comment about employees who contribute the least, the single dad finally raised his eyes. He didn't raise his voice, didn't shake with anger. He simply spoke with a calmness that surprised even himself. He shared how he had worked nights repairing machines that kept the company from losing thousands. He explained how he saved the factory floor during a flood when no one else was there. He described how he trained new workers who later earned promotions above him. He had done it all quietly, because responsibility didn't need applause, it just needed a heartbeat willing to show up. The billionaire's smirk faded, and for the first time he leaned forward, listening. The dad continued, not with pride, but with raw truth. He shared how this job wasn't just a paycheck. It was the roof over his child's head, the medicine she needed, the warmth in her winter coat. He didn't ask for pity. He didn't ask for special treatment. He simply reminded them that behind every number on a chart was a life, a family, a story. And sometimes the people who are judged the quickest carry burdens no spreadsheet could ever measure. Slowly, the men and women around the table lowered their eyes. Some swallowed hard. Some shifted uncomfortably. The billionaire exhaled, as if realizing he had walked into the room wearing armor and left himself unarmed. The silence stretched long enough for the dad to wonder if he had said too much. But then something unexpected happened. The billionaire closed the folder, set aside his pen, and looked at the single dad not as a number, not as an expendable worker, but as a man. In that quiet moment, The dad rewound through every hardship, nights spent crying in the bathroom so Anna wouldn't hear, mornings where he patched the same pair of shoes again because he couldn't afford new ones, days where he worked until his fingers bled. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel small. He didn't feel invisible. He felt seen. The billionaire announced that layoffs would be postponed, restructuring re-evaluated, and contributions reassessed with transparency. But the part that moved the room wasn't the policy change, it was the man who had spoken without anger, without fear, without bitterness. A single dad who chose honesty over ego. A man who had every reason to collapse but instead stood tall with quiet dignity. As the meeting ended, people approached him with nods, with gratitude, with newfound respect. But he didn't stay to bask in it. He rushed out of the building, drove across town, and arrived just in time to see Anna running out of school, her tiny backpack bouncing behind her. When she spotted him, she lit up like a sunrise. He lifted her into his arms, burying his face in her hair, whispering a thank you to the universe for giving him one more day of hope. He didn't tell her about the meeting. He didn't tell her he almost lost everything. Instead, he held her hand, walked her home, and let the simplicity of her laughter wash away the heaviness on his shoulders. Sometimes strength wasn't loud, it was simply choosing to keep going when the world expected you to break. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement truly helps these stories reach more people who need hope. Before you go, comment below, never underestimate quiet strength.